Thanks, Sid. So good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum, peace, salamuna. I speak to you today as an Afghan and as a Canadian. We're currently in the 11th year of the US and NATO-led war and occupation of Afghanistan. But American involvement in Afghanistan goes back 4 decades now, and British interference has been ongoing for centuries. Afghans, Canadians, Europeans, Americans, citizens all around the world have had enough. Afghans are dying, our country's heritage continues to be destroyed, the economic situation is as dire as ever, and the mission is creating and backing an unstable and illegitimate government that can't even honor its own claims to democracy. But the worst part of it all is that the mission is delaying the political and social progress that we Afghans must come together to unite and reject forms of outside interference, imperialism, oppression, and extremism, and ultimately build a stable peace. What we're seeing in Afghanistan right now, it's not a stable peace. Things were bad enough in 2001 before NATO entered the scene in Afghanistan. 11 years later, and we're faced with the daunting task of first undoing the damage that's been done by NATO, and then taking on the pre-existing issues that culminated in the ongoing civil war, poverty, and violation of basic rights. There's been little in the way of novel improvements, while the underlying issues that created the turmoil of the past 4 decades have been ignored and continue to serve as barriers in achieving everlasting peace in the country. The summit in Chicago will seek to continue NATO's destructive role in the country and ultimately deny Afghans our right to self-determine. Not because NATO believes it is acting in the best interest of Afghans, as they claim, but because the notion of a so-called democracy need be forced onto people everywhere under terms dictated by the West. Not even for the security of the Western population, but for Western firms. Our politicians will have us believe that Canada is in this mission as we have a duty to contribute to NATO, with the underlying assumption that we must choose one evil alliance in the world geopolitical scene or another in order to survive. So Afghans must unfortunately die for our Canadian way of life to continue. As a Canadian, I find this approach appalling and demoralizing. While I fully appreciate the realities of international politics and the need to cooperate with our international partners, as a nation, Canada can be a much greater country than one that seeks to build its legacy at the expense of justice and ethics and other people's lives. Rather, I imagine a Canada that leads, not follows, even in the presence of more powerful counterparts. I dream of a Canada that determines its own affairs rather than have them politely dictated from abroad or by a troubled coalition. I know that a truly successful Canada is one that attains affluence and influence in the world without compromising values of justice, freedom, and human rights. So instead of participating in the NATO-led invasion of Afghanistan, Canada should be opposing it. Instead of offering further defense commitments in Chicago, Canada should be opposing the U.S.-Afghan strategic partnership, which seeks to create permanent military bases in Afghanistan until at least 2024. Ongoing military presence in the country will ensure that the corrupt government of Hamid Karzai retains its power over a population that sees it as an illegitimate puppet. It can only mean more interference, more resistance, and more bloodshed. Worst of all, more delays before the country can finally emerge from decades of war for stable and permanent peace. This war is in its 11th year. How much more time before NATO realizes that there is no military solution to Afghanistan? There is no military solution to Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ali.